Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So it is December 1st today, and you know what that means. We have a fresh TBR to review. So before I get into the TBR, please make sure you hit the subscribe button below and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of my uploads. So for December, I had a fair amount of books in mind to read, but it is also a very kind of loose TBR. I do have several books that I definitely want to get through, and then I kind of have a little bit of a bonus round, I guess, of other books that I would like to read, but I'm not going to put a whole lot of pressure on myself to get through them. Of course, December is a really busy time, but I do always take a winter break from work, so I'll be off from December 18th or 19th, I think, right through till January the 4th. So I can definitely get some serious reading done during that time. But I also did want to work on a few other things during December. There's a short story that I'm working on, and most of it is still in my head, and I really need to get it out and down on paper before I start losing it. And there are some kind of true ghost stories that I wanted to research as well for another project that I'm working on. So like I said, I mean, I do still have a fair amount of books on here, but I wanted to make time for some other projects as well. The other thing for this month is this is going to be a themed TBR. So last month I read a lot of true crime, and for this month I wanted to do a TBR that was centered around books that come highly recommended from Booktube. So all of these books on here are 5-star reads from people that I watch here on YouTube, and most people, from what I can tell, generally do like these books. So I wanted to pick them up for myself before the end of 2020 and give them a try and see if they're worth all the hype. So without further ado, let's jump into the first book. So the first book that I have is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and as you can see, I've already started to read this book. I just picked it up this morning, so I'm not very far into it at all. So Leigh Bardugo is of course known for her YA writing. This is her first adult novel, but from what I've heard around Booktube, she absolutely blew it out of the park on this novel, and it comes very highly recommended. So this is also a dark academia, which is right up my alley. I love anything that's dark academia. And here we follow Alex Stern, who gets accepted into Yale University, which is somewhere where she doesn't really belong. She's not overly academic, and she's not wealthy. She doesn't have a whole lot of connections, so her being at Yale is just kind of a weird thing. So when she goes there, she gets pulled into a world of sororities and underground secret societies, and everything gets very dark and very violent for Alex. So like I said, this is probably the one that I wanted to pick up the most here. I was so intrigued to read it, and I don't think I've heard anything negative about this book. I do know that there's some content warnings for it, but I'm totally cool with that. But outside of that, I've heard nothing but good things. So this is the first up on the list. I've already started it, and I'm eager to get to the meat and bones of this one. So the next up on the list is The Diviners by Libba Bray. So this is the first in a series of 4 books. I was planning on reading all or most of the series this month, but I think I'm just going to stop with the first one so I don't get too burnt out with the story. But of course, if it ends on a cliffhanger and I absolutely have to pick up the next one, then I definitely will. This is another one that I haven't heard a single negative review about, and this one is a murder mystery. So this revolves around Evie, who in 1926 is sent to New York City to live with her uncle, who has an unhealthy obsession with the occult, and even Evie herself has some supernatural powers. So the body of a young woman is found, and it is branded with occult symbols. So her uncle is called in on the case, so Evie herself realizes that she probably has the powers to help stop a serial killer. So I think this one's going to be a really fast-paced sort of murder mystery, and I just not long ago finished the Truly Devious series, and I really loved it. So I'm anxious to get into this one, and like I said, I haven't heard a single negative review about this, so excited for this one as well. So next up is The Butterfly Garden by Hutchison, and from what I hear, this is an extremely brutal, extremely hard read. With the subject matter, it has content warnings for just about everything, but it does come highly acclaimed. I have heard middle of the road reviews of this, but I've also heard some really, really great things. This does have a sequel as well, but from what I've heard, the sequel is not as good as the first book. So I might just stick with reading this one. We'll see how it goes. So this is a story about a brutal madman who kidnaps women and he tattoos them with butterfly tattoos and keeps them in a beautiful garden, and he can have his way and do whatever the heck he wants with these women. So eventually the FBI uncovers the butterfly garden. So the investigators bring in one of the young women who was a survivor of the gardener for questioning, and her own answers begin to take their own twists and turns. So I did want to share a little bit of the synopsis on Goodreads because I think it sounds really, really great. As her story twists and turns, slowly shedding light on life in the butterfly garden, Maya reveals old grudges, new saviors, and horrific tales of a man who'd go to any length to hold beauty captive. But the more she shares, the more the agents have to wonder what she herself is hiding. So that sounds really great. I'm excited to get into that one. A little bit scared to get into it because of the content warnings, but I do read a lot of true crime, and usually when it's in a book instead of being on screen, it's totally fine with me. So I think I'm planning on doing a full review of the Butterfly Garden here, so stay tuned for that later on in December. The next one up on our list is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and this one is absolutely plastered everywhere on YouTube this year. So I have heard some not so great reviews, but I've heard a ton of 5-star reviews. So I kind of wanted to see where I myself would land with this one. It is a haunted house story, so that is one of my absolute favorite tropes. I haven't read any of Riley Sager myself, but I know that some people kind of have a little bit of a weird relationship with him. Some of his books are really good and they really appeal to them, and some kind of fell flat. So here we follow Maggie, who 25 years previous to the events that are happening in the current time, lived in an old Victorian estate with her mom and dad that was called Bainbury Hall. The family only lived there for 3 weeks before they fled in the middle of the night, being driven out by ghosts and a severe haunting. So just from that synopsis there, we have some Amityville horror kind of themes going on here. And her father details all of these events in a book that he wrote that had become a bestseller and drew a lot of crowds to the little town. So Maggie herself is not old enough to remember the events that happened, and she's also a severe skeptic. She doesn't believe a word of what her father wrote in her book. And so 25 years later, she actually inherits this old Victorian estate, and she intends to renovate it and put it up for sale. And while she's doing this, she starts to experience some things herself, and she's trying to figure out, are these things really happening, or can it all be explained away? So again, haunted house story. It comes highly acclaimed. We'll see if this one lives up to the hype. So I have this one on ebook, and I'm planning on starting this one this week as well. So between Ninth House and Home Before Dark, I will let you guys know how this reading week goes in an upcoming vlog. The next one up on the list is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. And this one does come highly acclaimed, but I think the 80s nostalgia was what really pulled me into this one. So the cover itself is just, it screams 80s. So in reading the synopsis of this book, it was really intriguing and it was really nostalgic for me. So here we follow two best friends. So we have Abby and Gretchen, who bonded over their love of E.T., roller skating, and scratch and sniff stickers. So from that right there, I was completely pulled into this one. But also when the two girls prepare to go into high school in the fall, Gretchen starts acting very, very strangely, and Abby is convinced that her best friend is being inhabited by a demon. And she embarks on a quest to save her best friends from the arms of the devil. So between the 80s nostalgia in this, and also because it's an exorcism story, I absolutely love anything that has to do with exorcisms or kind of ritualistic or religious hauntings. That's right up my alley. So I've heard nothing but good things about Grady Hendrix and all of his books, but this is the one that I wanted to start with. So next up we have Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas, and I really love the cover on this book. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And this is another dark academia, so we have a little bit of a theme of dark academia going on here, as well as highly acclaimed books. So this one, as well as my best friend's Exorcism, I just ordered from Amazon and they are on the way. So in this story, Catherine House is a very exclusive school for higher learning, and if you manage to get accepted after the rigorous application process, you have to leave absolutely everything behind and go to Catherine House exclusively for 3 years, including summers. So you have to leave everything, your friends, your family, TV, music, your clothing, everything has to be left behind from your old life, and you basically pour your heart and soul into Catherine House. And just reading from Goodreads, among this year's incoming class is Ines, who expects to trade blurry nights of parties, pills, cruel friends, and dangerous men for rigorous intellectual discipline, only to discover an environment of sanctioned revelry. The school's enigmatic director, Victoria, encourages the students to explore, to expand their minds, to find themselves and their place within the formidable black iron gates of Catherine House. So again, dark academia, and it's almost cultish with you having to leave absolutely everything behind, and you're not allowed to leave for a full 3 years. So I'm for sure excited to see what Catherine House is all about. So after all of the heavy content with those other books, I also have a little tiny book here. So this is Young Scrooge, a very scary Christmas story by R.L. Stine. So of course this is a very short middle grade book, and it's essentially a twisted retelling of A Christmas Carol. So here we follow Rick Scroogeman, who absolutely hates everything about Christmas. He hates the pageants, he hates the lights, he hates the trees, but most of all, he hates watching A Christmas Carol at school every single year during the holiday season. And of course, with a name like Scroogeman, he is often bullied and called Scrooge. But things change for Rick when he is visited by 3 ghosts. So he first thinks that it's a dream, but it soon turns into a nightmare that is becoming all too real. So that sounds like a really, really fun read. Like I said, it's super short. It's about 150 pages and the text is super big. So this, I think, is going to be a nice little flush after all of the heavy contents of those other books that we talked about. So the books that I have on here that are just sort of a bonus, I don't know if I'll get to these or not, but they are currently free on Kindle Unlimited, and this was a series that I really, really wanted to get into. It sounded so good to me, and that is the Messy Man series by Chris Sorensen. So book 1 is called The Nightmare Room, and this follows a husband and wife who moved back to the husband's hometown to look after his ailing father, and they also experienced a tragedy themselves and they want to have a fresh start. So they buy an old dilapidated farmhouse, and the husband, Peter, decides to set up a recording studio in the basement of the farmhouse. And after a while, Peter starts experiencing strange things, so he starts hearing voices and things coming through his recordings and strange sounds. So this is another haunted house story, and it is the first in a series of 3 books. So that's The Nightmare Room, and book 2 is called The Hungry Ones, and this revolves around the story of Jessie Voss, and she decides to purchase an old dilapidated motel that has a horrible history, and she wants to refurbish it and breathe old life into it. And then book 3, which just recently came out, is called The Messy Man, and it is the conclusion in the series. And here we follow Ellen, who is an 11-year-old girl who is trying to solve the mystery behind her father's disappearance and death. So that is the conclusion to the Messy Man series. So this one has come highly acclaimed by several people that I watch here on HorrorTube. So I'm going to download those since they are free right now on Kindle Unlimited, and like I said, I might get to them, I might not. I'm not going to put a whole lot of pressure on myself, but those are just going to be a little bit of a bonus. So that is everything. That is our December TBR. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to click the like button down below and leave me a comment. I'd really love to know if any of you guys have read any of these books and what you thought of them. But that's everything I have for you today. Until next time, stay spooky, guys. Bye.